You're listening to Back to the Roots podcast with Mike Klein and Brian Wood, and today we are sitting down with Alan Kozak, who is a dairy farmer in western part of Holmes County, Ohio. Milks 450 Jersey cows and is a dairy grazer. Alan is not an organic farmer, but we wanted to get his perspective on some other markets that he is pursuing with his dairy herd at this moment. So thanks for joining us, Alan.
Yes, you're welcome. Glad to do it.
Can you give us a little bit of background on the farm here, when you started farming and kind of up to present day?
Yes, I'll do it fast. Don't worry that I'm starting when I was 9. We moved to a dairy farm in western Pennsylvania when I was 9. I was in 4-H, FFA, all that stuff. And went to Penn State for dairy, came home to family farm. My father and I couldn't get along, but we got along fine. After that, we made up. But I worked 3 different jobs for over a 6-year period of time. Worked for Guernsey Association, Jersey Association, and Extension. I was an extension agent. But I always wanted to get back to the farm, so we borrowed 100% financing and started with about 125 cows in western Pennsylvania, close to home. We were there a year, and the infrastructure had collapsed in the 10 years that I had been away. 4 years at school and 6 years working, and that you couldn't buy feed, you couldn't get a vet, you couldn't get some work on your milking equipment. It was just tough, so we moved to Wayne County, Ohio, and rented a place, and cheaper feed, better milk market, all those things. We were there for 5 years, and then we moved here to this farm 20 years ago. We're still renting, and have grown the herd and built some buildings on rented land, and we're at 450 cows. We tried to grow to improve our efficiency, and seems like we're always a little bit behind the 8 ball there. I guess we've always been what they call a tweener. It's too big to be little and too little to be big, and it's not always a comfortable place to be, but that's where we are.
Mm-hmm. Now, how does that work with renting the farm? Do you build the buildings?
Yeah, we did. The last buildings we built were 07, but we had a provision where if the contract ended, like if the landlord would end the contract, then they would have to pay us for the undepreciated value of the building. But we have long-term lease, 5-year increments, right to renew it like every 5 years. And just landlords are glad we're here, and this is where we wanted to be. This is where we wanted to raise the family. They were comfortable here in school, and we even if you own the land and build a building, if it doesn't pay for itself in 10 years or 15, you shouldn't build it anyway. So that's what we did. It was either that or move. Either grow or move is at least the options that we thought were available. Mm-hmm. So, and we hope someday that, our hope is that we buy the farm someday, but there hasn't been enough profit in the last 10 years to even have a conversation about that with the landlord at $10,000, $15,000 an acre Holmes County land.
Mm-hmm. That's on the low end right now.
Right. Well, so. We live on the cheap side of the tracks.
So when you were in Pennsylvania for that, you said a year in Pennsylvania?
Yeah, 1 year.
Were you grazing there as well?
Yes.
Okay.
In fact, it was already set up, grazing. But yeah, we was kind of set up for grazing. It had a lot of room for improvement, we'll put it that way. But yeah, we've grazed all along. When I worked for Jersey Association and was out California, and I wanted to milk cows, and every budget I did was break even, and that was back figuring like $125 a ton hay, dairy quality hay. But I figured we could grow pasture for $50 a ton, and so then you had some profit, and that's what we did. And that's what, we were only there a year, and we didn't have a lot of benefit from grazing out there because it forgot to rain that summer. And the pastures were old and somewhat neglected, and canary grass that they wouldn't eat. And When we went to Wayne County, it was the same. It was 100 and some acres, and we've kind of always been a hybrid farm where we've never had enough pasture to provide as much of the dry matter from pasture as we'd like for, say, 6 months of the year. But and that's kind of the way it is here too. We graze, but we soon run out of grass, except for maybe, I don't know, depends on the year, mid-April to mid-June. We probably have 50%, 60% from grass, but the rest of the time it's anywhere from, of course, like today, 0 to, actually we have some heifers grazing, some corn stalks, but 0 to, to that 50 or 60.
Do you then, during the summer slump, I assume you're in like June and July, you're not grazing, but then do you see your pastures boost back up near the end of fall that you're able to get more dry matter off?
Oh,
during
yeah,
that
usually
period?
when it rains. Yeah, I mean, when you get cooler, yes, the answer is yes. Yeah, cool season grasses come back. And
How many grazing acres do you have here?
Well, we have 600 total, 200 acres in corn, and the rest is either hay or pasture. So I'd say 350. 350 in pasture, including here at the home farm, and then there's 30 acres at the county home. Yeah, and Locksterman's, we call it Locksterman's. There's 65 acres of pasture there, but that would be included in that 350 or so.
Okay.
And you're doing intensive rotational grazing when you're out there grazing?
Yeah, the milk cows get new grass every milking, and sometimes the dry cows, which we don't have a lot then because we're split seasonal, but we'll clean up behind the milk cows, and then the heifers they get new grass every day or two, and back fenced more than they used to, but not as intensely as probably should be. But we have buried water lines and hydrants, and we're going to put a few more frost-free ones out some of those places. But
so do you have groups of animals that graze, or do you have your one large group of 450 milk cows that are going to one paddock? And
they're split.
They're
split. Well, that's another issue, or question. So we have the herd split into a group that's all A2 cows, and they get non-GMO feed, and then the other herd is, mostly A1s, but there are some A2s in there too, depending on how much milk we need. And so they're always split. They're always split because that we have the barn across the road. The farm is divided by township road or split by township road, and like at night we'll keep the one group across the road overnight so we don't have to cross in the dark any more than we have to. So so two groups.
Well, let's get into the A2 thing. Can you explain A2 and then the market that you're selling that into?
There's a whole book on A2.
Yep. Yep.
Do you, now, just to ask a question before you answer that, have you been breeding A2 for a long time? Did you see this market possibly coming, and that's why you started breeding A2?
About 3 years.
Okay.
So jerseys are just, without even selecting, they're about 2/3 A2, and Holsteins are about 1/3 A2. And Guernseys are over 90% A2 on their own, without just if you took the average across the country. So back, whatever it was, 3 years ago, we were approached by Snowville to supply milk for them in the winter. And long story short, I suppose, once they realized, and we had already had the cows all genotyped anyway, that we had all the DNA done for herd improvement purposes, I guess, whatever. So all we had to do was call the lab and ask them to run. They still had the tissue samples on file. I guess they keep those. And they just ran the A2 on them. And so Yeah, it took way longer than it was supposed to, but we didn't have to go pull tissue samples again. So then Snowville wanted to have the A2 yogurt. Well, then after they realized how many A2 cows we had and how much milk we had available, they decided they were going to convert the whole creamery to A2, and that's what they did. So that was about 3 years ago. So that's when we started using all A2 bulls.
Do you bull breed or do you AI everything?
Probably 90% AI. We breed the heifers all a couple times AI, and we use sex semen. Even a Jersey that are easy calvers seem to have a heifer calf easier than to have a bull calf. And Jersey bull calves are worth 0, and Jersey and heifer calves are worth more than that. So we use sex semen, and plus our thoughts were if we wanted to convert the herd entirely to A2, we'd have more A2s. We could keep all the A2s and sell all the A1s, but that hasn't happened. We've sold some cattle. We've sold some of both.
And A2 is a dominant trait, right? If you breed for A2, it's like a polled
Like
homozygous polled genetics that it will come through in the offspring.
Well, I'm not sure I understand your question, but I know what you're trying to ask, I think. So a cow can be just like with horns, but they can be A1, they can be A1, A2, or they can be A2, A2. So I think that they're called alleles, 2 alleles. They all have 2. So what do they have? But a cow is only A2 if it's A2, A2. So, we call a cow that has one horned allele and one polled allele. They're polled because they're born without any horns. But an A2 cow, they have to be homozygous A2, or they don't want the milk.
Mm-hmm. And just to explain, correct me if I'm wrong. The A2, it's a protein. No, it's the way that the protein is digested in the milk in our bodies that is supposed to be better for humans. Some people connect A1 milk to lactose intolerance or not being able to digest milk, and A2 is supposed to be more readily digestible. Am I explaining that in a way that's fair?
It's not complete, but I've explained it a lot of times, and I'm not sure how good I am at it, but I'll give it a shot. The casein in milk, and I think I don't know which casein it is, but anyway, where the A2 is located, and I should know that, but it's 227 amino acids, and there's one 7-chain amino acid. They call it BCM7. It's a 7-chain amino acid, and it is the same chain in A1 milk as it is in A2 milk. The difference is that it is attached, that BCM7 is attached to the main molecule, to those other 220 amino acids, not molecule, chain of amino acids. It is attached in A1 milk with histidine, amino acid histidine. And I should know this, but I can't remember. In A2 milk, it's a different amino acid. And in the A2 milk, the amino acid where it's attached, where this 7-chain peptide, BM7, where it's attached is a lot stronger in A2 milk. So when you drink A2 milk, the bond is not broken. And that peptide, that BM7, does not break loose in your blood and get into your gut or your brain or in your blood or whatever, with people that have that issue. In A1 milk, that histidine is a weak bond, and that BM7 breaks off, and it's actually an opioid. It's similar to gluten. They find it in, like, if some people, they drink A1 milk and they'll find that opioid in their brain. Actually, can find it in their brain. And so there's a lot of research to be done. There's research being done by very reputable universities and researchers right now to see. But, anecdotally, a lot of people say it makes a big difference. And so people think I'm lactose intolerant. I do not have the ability to digest lactose because I get digestive upsets after I drink milk. And for some people that is true, and you can be tested for that. But in nature, that most people are allergic. Most allergens in nature are proteins, and this is a protein. And it seems so. Some people probably think they're lactose intolerant. If they've never been tested, then it could be, an A1 intolerance is what they really have. And like in India, all the cows are A2. And again, this is just anecdotally. A lot of Indian people can't drink our milk here in the U.S. because our milk in the U.S. is dominated by Holsteins. It's over 50% A1 milk. Anything you buy, unless someone has segregated for it, it is all A1 milk. And it seems like, I guess they say it doesn't really even matter. You would think more would make it worse, but it's pretty much when they want A2 milk, it's all or none. They don't want, okay, you're 80% A2 or you're 90%. No, it's 100%. And they can test it. They can test the milk.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think a lot of farmers in this area are doing it, and I would encourage more to do it. If you're breeding A1 or if you're breeding AI, artificial insemination, why wouldn't you go with the A2 sires if you can find? Because there's enough sires out there that are A2, and polled. Polled is the next thing. I think polled especially is going to be a huge issue. Something that we need to push for the future.
Right. And the reason people wouldn't breed for A2 and the reasons people wouldn't breed for polled would be it limits your sire selection. Mm-hmm. But the studs, from an AI standpoint, the studs now are, all things being the same, they'll take the A2. And more people are breeding that way, and so there are more and more available. So the trend is certainly in that direction. Mm-hmm. But like polled, like for me, for polled, we've used a little bit of polled heterozygous polled semen, but you're always compromising on production or conformation or something else. It's just, you can put a really nice group of bulls together that you want to use, and none of them will be polled pretty easily. And polled is almost always a compromise. You got to give up something else, which all breeding's that way. If you want a really good udder, you're probably going to lose some milk. Mm-hmm. If you want a cow to give a pile of milk, you're probably going to lose some components. Mm-hmm. Or maybe
there's a trade-off on everything that you're shooting.
Yeah.
But there are more and more good polled genetics out there. But these, especially guys that are bull breeding, if you're bull breeding, your genetics are probably not the best genetics available.
Right.
So might as well throw polled in there if you're going to bull breed, is my opinion.
Right.
Because I think that is a little bit of a, I don't want to call it a dirty secret, but the amount of dehorning in dairy, I think the general public might not be aware of, every animal is dehorned or disbudded, which is by far the best way to do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, do it young. And we use lidocaine, and we give them a painkiller pill. It helps.
Which that is a standard now, and pretty much every program out there for animal care, animal welfare is you've got to use pain medication.
Dehorning's wicked.
Mm-hmm. Well, I always tell you always got the farmers that are saying, well, with dehorning, with the big gougers, and I've got some farmers that are, well, that's the way we've always done it. Why would I change any of that? And the story I always tell is when I was working on my uncle's dairy, I would do whatever he asked, and he asked me one day to help out with dehorning. Well, we got him in the headlock, and we did that. And after we got done, I said, I'll do whatever you want around here. Don't ever ask me to do that again. Do not ever ask me to do that again. You had the blood spurting out, and for 2 days after, you could see them scratching at the spot, and then some of them, there was blood coming down the side of their face. And, I think it is a dirty little secret. And there are more and more people that are finding out about it, which is why these polled genetics, non-horned animals, I think the bull, the semen is quickly becoming, I think part of the reason why it's not required right now, polled genetics isn't required right now, is because the genetics aren't there. You're giving up too much.
But can't they now they can now just pull that gene out, correct? Out of the semen?
I was going to say that, but I didn't want to. But yeah, I think they, and my guess is, yes, they can, but they have to do it, commercially. It's not available yet. And the thing is, they start doing gene editing. They can edit all kind of genes. Think about that.
Yeah.
You're getting into a whole nother world there.
Yeah, it's a whole nother deal. Yeah. But that wouldn't surprise me for a minute.
But I do think that the bull genetics, in the meantime, before they start doing the gene editing stuff, the bull genetics for polled animals are improving significantly every year, because I think they see that the industry is moving that way of eventually polled genetics are probably going to be required. I would say my guess is within the next 10 to 15 years, polled genetics will be required, and there will be no more dehorning or disbudding or any of that kind of thing. But, we're kind of going between two topics here, polled and A2. Back to the A2, the A2 stuff, it's really been gaining some traction, like you said.
Right.
It still seems to be a niche product.
Right.
But, we've got Meyer stores. I don't know if you have them around here in Michigan. And they have that A2 milk. And I think that comes out of New Zealand, because that's where it was originally, the research was started to do on that.
Right.
And I think, like you said, there's university research being done on these proteins and peptides and all that kind of thing. But there's a lot of anecdotal stories of families that have kids that when they switch from mama's milk to cow's milk, all of a sudden they're breaking out in rashes and they're colicky and having issues, and all of a sudden, they are switching to A2 milk, and those problems are going away immediately.
Yeah. A human milk's A2.
Yep.
Humans are A2.
Yep. So I think there's a lot more to be done there, but I think you're on the, like you said, we have a lot of farmers that we work with too that are breeding that way, but it's being mixed with everything else.
Right.
So, that the A2 stuff is coming. It's coming down the road.
I guess the one thing, and you brought it up a little bit ago, Alan, is, what percentage of A2 milk in the supply chain does it take for somebody who has an intolerance to A1? Let's say you've got 100 cows and you've got one cow that's A1. Will that be diluted enough that person will be able to drink the milk, or is it all or none?
Well, I sure would think that there'd be some dilution effect. I don't really know, but there would have to be. But I don't know that. I mean, they say all or none. I don't know.
And I'm sure that's partially for marketing purposes, and that they can market it as A2 milk, and
because you get in a lot of trouble if you marketed A2 milk and you had 90% A2. That wouldn't work.
No. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And the struggle, one of the struggles is the A2 milk company has a patent on the testing of the milk. Maybe I might be speaking.
Yep.
But there are people that actually can test for it. There are ways to test for it, but the machine just costs a pile of money. I mean, just a pile of money. And so at the moment, you can just test the cows, and then make sure you keep them segregated, and whatever. We always milk the A2 cows first. And
so, do you have 2 tanks?
Yes.
Okay, and then you also ship milk to another market. Well, you ship milk through National Farmers Organization, correct?
Correct.
But so you go to Snowville Creamery through National Farmers, but don't you also provide the milk for a Jersey milk cheese?
Yeah, Yeah, that's a interesting topic. But so any milk that doesn't, so with Bunker Hill cheese, we started working with them a couple years ago, and they made a cheese from milk only from our farm, and it actually won the it was a non-Swiss champion a couple years ago, and it was pretty good. It was a good cheese. It's soft cheese, mild cheese, moist cheese, and they didn't. Not much of it got sold. Frankly, I'm not quite sure. Well, I know. I think I know why. And so, for whatever reason, well, Jersey, they called it Jersey Fresh. Well, the state of New Jersey has Jersey Fresh trademarked because they use it for their fruits and vegetables, so we couldn't use Jersey Fresh anymore. And Bunker Hill was making some raw milk cheeses, and they're pretty well received. So they said, well, we'll make this Jersey milk, this Jersey Fresh, which you can't call it that anymore. We're going to make it with raw milk and see how that goes. And they did, and they actually heat it to 144, but legally it's not pasteurized. So they have to hold it for 60 days. And it seems to me, and it seems to everybody that has compared them, that this raw, and they just call it raw milk Jersey cheese, and that it gets its flavor sooner, because the other, it seemed like it had to get out the 4 or 6 months till it was good. Before then, it was pretty bland. But this raw milk Jersey gets there sooner, and I mean, it has better flavor. I actually think it's a better cheese, and we weren't moving very much of it. They weren't moving very much of a Bunker Hill, and for them, it's one of 100 cheeses or 50 cheeses or whatever. And so we developed our own label, created our own label, and they're cutting. Asked them if we can send them milk. We'll pay them to make it into cheese, and then pay them to cut and wrap it and put our label on it. So that's what we've done. And it was amazing. The cheese is good cheese, but it was just amazing how well received it was. Like 5 of the first 6 people I talked to bought cheese. I want 5 cases. Well, I want 4 cases. I want 7 cases. I want 2 cases. I had a fella here working on, we put a new tank in, and he was working on replacing the wall because we had a bulkhead the tank, and I brought them out a plate of cheese for lunch, and, he said, I want 20 pounds of that I'm having church. The Amish fella, I'm having church, I want 20 pounds of that. And he just called me today, where's my cheese? So I'm still waiting for it to get cut and wrapped. So that project, what I learned, and I was thinking about this when you talked about this podcast. And I'm not a small farm by Holmes County standards, but I'm a small dairyman by industry standards. And I'll diverge a little bit because that's kind of how I am. I went to Cornell they have what they call a dairy executive program. It's 3 sessions, 3 days each. And I was in 14. And it's thousands of dollars, lodging and foods included, but still a lot more money than I ever spent on anything. And the one thing that I learned up there was that I can't compete with those guys. They're renting land for $50 an acre. They're drag lining all their manure. They're getting 20 ton of corn silage. They're efficient. Land's $1,500 back then. In 14, they still were buying land for $2,000 an acre. Now, they had to get on the roof once a year and shovel off or supervise the shoveling off of 4 feet of snow once in a while when they got lake effect snow. And they were, in fact, doing that when we were there for one of the meetings. But one of the things I learned is I just can't compete with 400 cows on a rented farm in Holmes County. I just cannot get efficient enough to be competitive. What I'm doing, if I was doing well, they'd be getting filthy rich and putting money, not filthy rich, I shouldn't say that, but doing very well and putting money away or paying off debt so the next time there was a down cycle, they could buy the next 200 acre or 200 cow dairy that went out of business and put, 200 heifers in there or whatever they were going to do. And so my point is, we need to. So what do you do? So what I've learned with this cheese project with Bunker Hill is people love, for the most part, they really like to buy from the farmer. They like to know the farmer, and farm to fork. My son goes to Denison, and they have a program, Farm to Fork, and they buy, and Bon Appetit does too. And I think they want to buy like 20% of their food within 150 miles of, like, Bon Appetit, of their offices. And then they manage some of the food for Denison. And Denison's standards are 40%. So they want to buy 40% of their food from sourced within 150 miles of campus. And that really gives you, and they're not going to buy a semi-load a week, but that's just out. That kind of stuff is out there. People really like that. They really, and I think if there's an answer, there's that for a small farm. That's the answer. Is you just have to, connect with the consumer and offer them something that has to be good, but it doesn't have to be $30 a pound cheese. And maybe it is $30 a pound cheese, but it doesn't have to be. Just a good basic blue-collar cheese or yogurt or whatever. So I think there's opportunity there, but when you sit and think about it, you're, trying to manage a herd and manage the crops, and it's one more layer. And so maybe some of the opportunity is for farmers, small farmers, to band together, a little bit like they did with Greenfield or something like that. I mean, if there's, it seems to me like that, something like that could be part of the solution. But so anyway, so we, like Snowville, they're probably taking, it's less than 30% this year of all of our milk, probably closer to 25. And in Bunker Hill, that is pretty much negligible. I think we made 5 or 6 loads of cheese this year, 18,000 pounds of milk, so whatever that is, it's not very, as a percentage of our milk, and 5,000 of it pounds of cheese I own, and it's still over there. So, and then the rest of it goes to Alpine cheese. As Jarls, they make I guess they make it into Jarlsberg, Swiss.
I was in Denmark talking to a representative for the Arla Co-op, who owns the Jarlsberg cheese in Denmark, and he said, yeah, they license it to one little creamery cheese plant in the United States. I'm like, yeah, I know, it's Alpine cheese. It's 10 miles from my house. And so if it doesn't have big enough holes in it for Jarlsberg, it's Alpine Swiss.
Oh, is that right?
That is good cheese.
Yeah.
So for these markets that, like these, more localized markets, it sounds like, with managing the farm, you didn't want to take on the responsibility of having to go out and market and sell and do all that kind of stuff. So did you seek out these opportunities with Snowville and Bunker Hill, or were they coming to you and saying, hey, there's an opportunity here? Or did you go to them and say, hey, I think, we can try and make something work here?
It's interesting. Snowville Creamery is built on land that Bill and Stacy Dix had bought. It was their second farm, and we met Bill and Stacy probably 25 years ago. They bought some heifers from us 25 years ago, and so we had a connection there. And then Lynn and Eric Karcher are leasing, or bought, well, yeah, I think they're leasing the dairy from Bill and Stacy. Bill and Stacy have retired, and when Snowville wanted to make A2 yogurt, they were looking for A2 cows, and I had known Lynn, and so they approached me to buy. This is a long story. So they approached me to buy A2 cows. So they bought A2 cows, and they went down there, and they were real low cell count and high components, and they just loved them. They loved the milk, and then that's when things started brewing. Where would you consider and we already just happened to have 2 bulk tanks. So, can you segregate the herd? Well, yeah, we already have them, DNA tested. All we do is run them back through the tissues back through for A2, and so that's how that ball started to roll with Snowville. And then with Bunker Hill, Snowville was looking for a way to use more of our milk during the summer months, so they brought up the possibility of making cheese with our milk. And then it didn't work out, but Bunker Hill and Sharon and I, my wife, just talked about, well, that's, there's an idea there. So Bob had a consultant from New England and said, hey, I never made cheese with all Jersey milk before. What would you do? And so I think they sent him some culture or whatever, and they made it, and then he aged it 2 different ways, and the one way turned out better than the other way, the aging process, and that's how that got started. And that one has not, especially since I bought these labels and all that stuff, and we're sitting on 5,000 pounds of cheese. That is a struggle. It's been a struggle, and it has not been profitable in any way, shape, or form. And it's hard. In theory, you should be able to find a small local cheese plant to make your milk into cheese for you and then let you market it. But I've approached other local cheese plants, and no one's interested. And, I've got cheese sitting out there that I can't get cut and wrapped because it's a busy time of year or whatever. So it sounds good on paper, but realistically, it hasn't worked all that well.
So as far as like them, not other local companies or other cheese houses that you've approached about buying milk, are they just in a position where you're losing out to those farms that you were talking about, that the more efficient, the larger, that they can just buy in milk for, I know there's milk coming from Michigan for $8-9 a hundredweight, which is significantly below
right
any. So you're just kind of, like you said, caught in between in those cases. Is that kind of what you're seeing happening?
Well, we're getting federal order price at Alpine, and we used to get bonuses. We used to get protein premiums, whatever, with DFA, but DFA wouldn't let us do anything special. It's all or none. Either all goes to Alpine or... So we left. We thought we left with their blessing, but they still control Alpine, and so they allow us to go in with which is a kind of amazing deal. We had where last week or that week before, Snowville had a manufacturing glitch, had a pump go down or something, and they didn't take any milk, and we ended up with 40,000 pounds of milk. And I called Denny up. Denny said, I said, man, we got to get these tanks emptied. Can't milk. And the milk, it wasn't old yet. It was all legal, but it wasn't good. Wasn't going to be. And he sent his special driver in with the semi, and he called Alpine, can we bring you 40,000 pounds of milk? And they took it. Luckily they're big enough, and they like our milk at Alpine too. They always have, but we're just not getting paid the protein premium for it anymore. So I completely understand your question, but so that's how that works. And the locally, I think our milk is good enough, and I know it is. About any local cheese plant will buy it, but that's not enough money. December milk's $13.88. Jersey milk, we might get we might get 20 for that, and our cost of productions depends, but it's above 20. I know that. 22. It depends on feed prices, but $22 to $25 is the cost of production. Mm-hmm. You can live on 18 or 19 for a while, but not very long. It's not very fun.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What can these big farms that you mentioned that you were saying are more efficient, what is their cost of production? Do you have any idea?
I would think, the Jersey farms certainly get theirs under $20, so they're breaking even at the lowest price, but then they might not be getting quite as much as we are. And I saw it was all theoretical, but I think it was University of Illinois showed a thing where the true cost of production, if you figure I'm paid the family labor and all that stuff, and a 50 cow herd might be $45. $45. Excuse me, $45 a hundredweight. Don't quote me on that, but it was high. And then so you go to 100 cows and it might be 38. Then you go to 250 cows and it might be 30. Then you go to 500 cows and it might be $25 a hundredweight. And then you go to 2,000 cows and it's 18. And so from the right side of the graph at 2,000 cows, there's time when milk's below 18 and they're bleeding, but when things get good, they get really good for some of those folks. And, there'll be big farms go out too, but if you look at the graph, I went to Penn State. I graduated from Penn State in '84. When I graduated, there were 250,000 dairy farms, and today there are probably less than 40,000 today. And it's pretty much a straight line. Some years are worse than others. Some 2 and 3 year periods are worse than other 2 and 3 year periods. But over time, the trend is clear as can be. Fewer farms and bigger farms, and
fewer farms and more cows.
Yeah. So, we load our mixer with a skid steer, and they load their mixer with the payloader. We haul our manure 4,500 gallons at a time up and down the hills of Holmes County, and we have 200 acres of corn and we have 20 fields. They have 500 acre fields. 200. The big efficient ones. This is the way it is.
How many pounds of milk per employee do those what is their target?
Well, it depends on, if they're buying feed and all. I think that, it used to be 1 million, and now you see 1.5 or 2 million. It's crazy. 100 cows per person, given 25,000 pounds of milk is, they got rotary parlors and.
Because I just remember a couple of years ago you told me that a lot of those guys' target is like 1.5 million per employee, and I look at a 50 cow dairy here that's shipping 600,000 pounds, and look at the amount of work that goes into producing that 500,000 pounds, and they're expecting that 3 times that out of an employee.
Yeah. So
for the small farm to survive, you have to do something like you're doing with Snowville and with Bunker Hill. You cannot. It's like me going to an NFL game and asking if I can play.
They'll let you be the football.
Yeah, I know that. Pretty much it.
Let's see how far we can kick you.
Yeah.
But these 50 cow farms, the other option is also a specialty market or like organic.
Right.
And so, I guess the question would be, did you ever look at going organic, and what held you back? And, we're not going to go into organic versus conventional, which is better or anything like that. But just curious if, looking at the local options versus organic, that's how the 50 cow farms, some of the Holmes County folks, the Amish folks have decided that's their best route to stay in business.
Right.
Have you looked at that too?
Well, a little bit, but the one is, and I'm not throwing my wife under the bus at all. She would support me in this. She really doesn't have a lot of interest in it. She raises the calves, and she just doesn't see how she could get by without being able to treat them, whatever. And I guess I understand a little better than her how people do that. And then with our herd size, and we buy feed and whatever, that my understanding of organic is you need to be pretty well self-sufficient feed wise, and we'd have to cut the herd way back, and then you have the transition, 3 transition years, and you can get some help in there, I think, but and over time, you've just watched folks transition and then not, and then be transitioned and then not get on the truck or whatever. And it just really scares me. And and the other thing is that it's my understanding, I don't know if this is true or not, that I've heard, there's more consolidation in the production of organic milk than in conventional milk. So bottom line is, And well, in fact, a couple of those folks at Cornell, had 300 and 500 cow organic dairies. They bought dairies and, converted them. I'm obviously at 400 cows would be a lot more competitive, but I could never milk 400. With our land base, we might be closer to 200. I don't know. I don't know what the math is.
I think the bigger herds. Let's say you were to go organic, the hurdle would be the 30% dry matter.
Right.
On your grazing, which is the minimum requirement. But we have a lot of farms that are not 100% feed self-sufficient. If you can raise your own corn silage,
right.
If you can raise your grain and buy your hay, you'll do fine.
Right.
But it's the buying all the grain. That's where the crop guy is going to make his money, is raising grain.
Right.
So, buy hay, because if you buy corn, you get a load of corn.
Right.
You buy hay, you can pick what you want.
Right.
So, I think it would be doable here, but you would probably definitely have to cut numbers.
Right. So that just never, it's just we considered it, but never all that seriously. And, and on these hills, growing organic corn would mean you'd have to cultivate, plow or whatever, do something, and we're pretty much no-till, and that just seems to be enough barriers that, and we thought, that we, between Snowville, and which started 3 years ago, and Bunker Hill, which 2 years ago, and those are challenges. If you just look at, well, Bunker Hill, we haven't sent enough to them to really make a difference, so that's pretty much a non-issue. Then the price that we had negotiated was a good price, but not a crazy price, and there would have been times when, if and when this milk price ever recovers, where we might actually be a little bit below market price. We couldn't agree to make a provision where we would never be below market price. But if I can get a profit, I always get a profit. Well, what else can you ask for? Mm-hmm. And the price was so. And then the Snowville thing is, Monday they might take 26,000. Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and then Wednesday they may take 6, and Friday they take 6,000. And I've done all that work to make all that milk, and then I get to sell it to Alpine for $18 or $19. Not very exciting. So it looks good, but it's been. You got to babysit the milk. I shouldn't say it that way, but you got to babysit the milk tanks, to make sure the right milk. We always milk in the same tanks, but when they haul milk, if Snowville doesn't take very much milk, then I got to make sure it gets empty and cleaned. Mm-hmm. And sometimes the trucks have room, and sometimes they don't. It's just kind of It's more work than it looks like.
Mm-hmm. Now, are you the sole provider of milk for Snowville, or do they have
other
producers?
No, they have other producers.
They do?
There were 5 or 6 of us. I know pretty sure there are 3 or 4 of us now.
Okay.
But I'm, at times, I think half at times.
Okay.
But sometimes a third.
They still milk cows there at Bill and Stacy's?
Right. Yeah, I just talked to Lynn this morning.
Okay.
On Carter. Yeah, they're still milking cows. Right there, surrounded by the dairy. And
yeah, what do you see looking 5 years in the future with conventional milk? Do you see it rebounding? Or are we going to keep seeing the smaller farms get out, consolidations, and bigger get bigger?
Well, some of both. Mm-hmm. You'll see some of both. I think price is going to rebound some, and we might even have the longer this bleeding goes on, 1388 December Class 3. The longer that goes on, when it does recover, and if the stars line up as far as world trade and, Mexico and NAFTA and I don't know, and Canada and China and all that stuff, then all of a sudden we might be, it might be screaming crazy for prices for a while. But I think the trend is clear. It's just going to be, just milk price over time relative to the margins just be tight over time. I think you have to find something else. or create something. And I don't. Look, I had someone approach me about non-GMO, which Snowville's a non-GMO, but completely non-GMO, non-GMO verified, and which actually Snowville standards are higher than the non-GMO verified project. But if someone said to take all my milk and give me $2-3 a hundredweight or something, that probably be pretty easy to do. But the problem is they want you to make it, and then they don't want to take all of it because it will variable. So then you add $2 or $3 cost to all your milk, but they take half of it. So actually, they need to pay you $6 to break even, and they don't want to pay $6. But my whole point—that's not my point. The whole point is that is easy to replicate. The guy with 3,000 cows, even the A2 thing, if it gets rolling, all you gotta do is, even if they're Holsteins, they're milking 10,000 cows, just find a third of the herd that's A2 and milk them first into the direct load truck, and there you have it. And even the A2 milk, it comes in, I'm pretty sure it's ultra pasteurized, and pretty sure it's just Holstein milk from some consignment dairy somewhere. And not that any of that is bad, but I think you can differentiate yourself. Ours milk is from Jersey cows that graze the hills of Holmes County. And A2. So those, and they can't, I won't say they can't replicate that, but it's a lot harder to replicate.
The only way to replicate pasture is use pasture.
Right. Well, and milk jerseys and the people, 4 million visitors a year comes to Holmes County. One of the things that, and it's just really, we've only had one meeting. I got drafted into the Holmes County, the Chamber of Commerce, and Shasta Mass, the executive director, put it we had a meeting, like a committee that got together talking about, what can we do for agriculture in general, small, because most agriculture in Holmes County is small comparatively, and what can we do? Because obviously selling our products as commodity, competing with the larger dairies or crop farmers or whatever, or whatever. Any of that is tough, but we get 4 million visitors a year come through here, and what can we do to add value above and beyond? But we just had one meeting and brainstormed, but it's people are thinking about it, but we need to create something or things.
I think in order to survive, you have to be willing to look at other alternatives. You can't just do the same old and expect different results. Especially in the climate where dairy in general is in the world, farmers have to be willing to look at all options that are out there and look for new options.
And create new options even. I don't know where it is now. I don't know if it was in Progressive Dairyman or Farm Shine or one of those. I don't remember where it was, but there was it might have been in Pennsylvania. I think the lady was from Pennsylvania, but people make their own cheese. Make their own tea. I mean, it's a whole other venture, and you almost have to have some, either hire someone to do it or someone in the family that, a child that wants to come back into business or something. Because I've learned that it was a little bit I dabbled around, and we are 2 employees short. We hired 2, but they're not. One starts the 12th and one sometime between now and the end of the year. But so I'm doing whatever I used to do, or some of what I used to do, plus, mixing all the feed. And I don't have time at all now to do anything. But even then, it was time consuming.
And I think that's the issue is most farmers want to be farmers, not marketers.
Right.
And you've got to have either a desire to market your product or somebody who's willing to market it for you.
Right. And what I said, what I learned, if say, for example, Bunker Hill, they go to somebody, a potential buyer, and they say, we have this new cheese. You should try it, or would you want to buy it? Well, for one thing is, people only buy so much cheese, and even if they buy the new one, it might displace one they used to buy, another Bunker Hill cheese, or maybe it displace, Kraft cheese, who knows. But there's some of that going on. But the story is so much better received. It's the same cheese, but the story is, my family and I have a farm in Holmes County. Bunker Hill made this cheese for us. Milk only from our cows. They're Jersey cows. We graze some, and we're going to give a portion of the proceeds to support local youth through 4-H, FFA, Holmes Education Foundation, whatever. It's different than because it's just me. It's just us. And someone told me that if you're going to market things farm to fork, someone in your family has to do it. And I believe that to be true. The reception I get is, it really kind of feels neat. You're Nancy Ross, Granville IGA. My son goes to Denison. We were down there buying groceries for him. I didn't get to talk to her the first time in, but they said that's who I need to talk to. So the second time I went, I took a piece of cheese with me, and it was Bunker Hill cheese in a Bunker Hill wrapper. It wasn't our cheese. I mean, it's our cheese. It was a cheese made from our milk. It was the Jersey cheese. And she already had 10 Bunker Hill cheeses in there. And I gave her a piece and put my phone, a little sticky note, my name and my phone number on it. Talked to her for about a half an hour and told her who I was, and my son was going to school here, and we're farmers and whatever. And a week later, she calls me. She says, I liked your cheese. She says, we have it, and they were already getting it through Troyer's, I think, distributing. And then all I had to do was order it. And, we got it in, and we stopped in and looked, and it's there, and you can see that they're selling it. Some of it's disappearing and whatever. But that story told by a salesman.
Yeah.
And if it's the same salesman that's been coming there for 10 years, might say, depends on what level of respect and all that sort of thing. But, we have 10 cheeses, and this one's even better. Well, it doesn't even matter. Yeah. I don't know. So my point is this. I don't think you can hire someone to help you market it. You might be able to hire someone to market it some. It really has to be the right person. It has to be someone that's, that really can represent your farm. You can't just hire someone that represents 99 other businesses.
You can't just get somebody and give them talking points about your farm. They've got the person marketing the cheese directly from the farm has to know what's going on the farm. Right. And it helps to even be involved.
Yeah, it's like I said, it's neat. The people's reaction to the farmer, and I think that's untapped.
Well, Alan, I think we're going to wrap it up here. I really appreciate you taking the time, and this was an interesting conversation. I'm kind of excited to talk to you down the road to see what's going on with the cheese, and hopefully that'll take off for you. So thank you very much for joining us.